Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session where we are going to talk about IBM's view and capabilities to support API-led integration. My name is Andrew Humphreys. I am a product manager within IBM Integration, and I'm going to be taking you through some slides at the beginning. And also on the call, we have Suresh Shah, who is also a product manager in the IBM Integration division, who's going to be showing you a few demos and showing a few features that we actually have in the product technologies. But I wanted to start with a discussion really about what is it that we're seeing in the IT industry? What are the trends that we're seeing in the IT industry? And how are those leading to the rapid surge in demand for both APIs and the ability to do API-led integration? And really that comes down to three key trends that we're really seeing happening across the board for customers. This is IT trends rather than integration specifically, where we're seeing an increasing need to accelerate innovation. And we're seeing that companies are choosing to respond to this demand to be able to go faster and be able to deliver things more quickly by looking at the way that they're structuring their teams. And this has led, particularly if you think about like the world of applications, to empowering teams to actually own the full like soup to nuts of what they're trying to build. So an application would be responsible for what it would do in terms of any integration layer that it would need or any database layer that it would need. And these kind of working of like moving away from having big centralized things like integration teams which manage all of the integrations within an organization, and has led to different architectural patterns like adopting agile methods and so forth. But this is in a world where there's two trends which are making it increasingly difficult to get that innovation and agility that you need. And this comes from the first trend of this is around the growing complexity that we see in the world. We're saying that like in the statistic I have here, organizations typically have like over 1,000 applications in their portfolio. And that is rapidly growing too. As they adopt things like SaaS applications and move their applications to the cloud, and as they look to deliver new innovative applications, this problem only gets bigger and it becomes a bigger problem for integration. How do I keep all these things connected? How do I talk to all these endpoints? How do I successfully integrate my network in order to deliver that innovation that I want? And this is in a world where it's increasingly difficult to get and retain people with deep technical skills. If we think about that in the integration space in particular, it's increasingly difficult to get people who actually know what is involved in building a first-class API or know a first-class way of building integrations. And if you get those people, they're hard to retain. So there's a general challenge around like, how can we actually do this? How can we build things that we need? And if we think about this in specifically in terms of integration, in terms of using APIs, what is it that's really driving that need for API-led integration? And I really think this comes down to three key areas. The first is related to that first point about innovation. It's like increasingly customers are looking to build new digital customer experiences. So it's ways that we can reach out directly to our customers in order to interact with them and get like kind of new digital channels which enable us new lines of business and so forth. And in order to do that, we need to build things which offer a premium integration, user experience. And in order to do that, that means we need to be integrated. Because if you think about like something like, say, like an airline mobile app, that app is not much use if you can't use it to actually purchase a ticket or reserve a seat. I need to be able to be integrated with the back-end systems for a new digital experience to be useful. And that drives a need for integration. And what we're increasingly seeing is that the way that people want to solve integration challenges, so how is it that we can connect the enterprise, is really driven by making this as agile as possible. And the core concept here, and the core concept around API integration, is the way that I will solve any integration challenge is by exposing any system that I have or any interface that I'm interested in using as an API. And then I can build new customer experiences very simply by just assembling those APIs. I can just orchestrate APIs in order to build new things and therefore get more agility and have that built into my entire IT architecture because everything is exposed as these reusable API interfaces. Therefore, that's what I'm looking to do is in order to build digital customer experiences, I want to do that by providing integration through APIs. So building, managing, and exposing APIs become a critical requirement for me. And that at its core is basically what API integration actually is. But what we're also seeing is this couples with the trends that we're seeing I mentioned on the first slide, where we need the ability to be able to make integration more agile. And what I mean by this is, like, traditional approaches to integration are seen as pretty inflexible. And that to be honest, is by nature, by design, in that traditional integration software is very much designed to worry about system of record integration. So it needs to be accurate, it needs to be correct. And we're more concerned with like availability, reliability, accuracy of the data being transferred than we are with speed and agility. But as we've seen, if we couple that with the thoughts around like agile architectures and looking at how we make agile teams and so forth, this is an inhibitor to what we're trying to achieve when we're trying to do API integration. We want the ability to build things much more quickly and be much more centralized control. So this is a trend that underlines everything around API integration. It's not just how do I build APIs, how do I manage APIs, but who is doing that? What skills does that person have? How can I make that easy as possible in order to get the benefits I want from API integration? And this is really what IBM's viewpoint on this is we need a solution for building and managing APIs, which is better and faster and easier than anyone else has in market. So if we just step back a little and think about what do we actually need to be successful in API-led integration? And really, I would talk about that as be able to create, secure, manage, and socialize APIs. So think about what we're trying to achieve here. We need to make it as easy as possible to create APIs. And this means like either creating APIs from scratch, or in the terms of integration, it means exposing APIs on existing systems or new systems as reusable interfaces. Those will be on new microservices I'm building, on enterprise applications, SaaS services, all the same. We need to be able to make it very easy and quick to be able to build APIs, because agility is key to our whole success. Once we've got APIs, we need to be able to control access to them. So we need to be able to apply things like policies on top of those APIs, which do things like rate control or access control, in order to control who can access those APIs, make sure that I don't overload back-end systems and so forth. So securing access is critical capabilities around API-led integration. And then we also need to be able to manage APIs. So we need to control, we need to understand and be able to understand who is going to use APIs. We need to control the life cycle of the APIs. Don't exist together. I might want to introduce new versions and so forth. So the ability to manage is equally critical. And then also critical around APIs is what I want to be able to do is make these APIs reusable. So I want to empower people to be able to use those APIs. I don't want to proliferate APIs everywhere. I want people to understand what APIs are available to me, what things I can do, and so forth. So socialization becomes critical. And these four capabilities together is what we need to be successful with API-led integration. And if we start looking a little bit about what IBM provides and how what tooling and capabilities IBM provides all of these capabilities, and it provides them all individually or collectively in what we call the Cloud Platform Integration. And what we have in the Cloud Platform Integration is a single experience that lets you to build an API from scratch and apply policies to that and do any build, test, debugging, and so forth that you want to do. And then once you built that API, you can then deploy it, supporting like API v3 as the latest API standard. But what differentiates IBM is obviously a lot of people have the ability to be able to build APIs, is our ability to use automation and AI in order to simplify that process. If you hark back to what I was saying before about the skills barrier and the need to build more and more APIs, it means that it has to be as easy as possible to do it. We need people to be able to build APIs. It's like not having like kind of a degree in API creation. And how IBM does this is a real differentiator for us in the market. It's how easy we make this whole end-to-end experience. And the basis for what we're doing for this is we have this technology we call called IBM Integration Designer, which is a completely fresh and new way of building not just APIs, but any integration that you would want to build. And what it is it guides you through the process of building a first-class API. So it's like a wizard in old language. That makes it very easy to build like a first-class API. So instead of you having to go and read thousands of pages of manuals and books about what first-class API design is, it's built in for you. And this tooling guides you through that entire process. So it makes it much quicker and easier to build APIs through an automated process. There are a number of ways it does this, and Shreyas is going to take you through a demo which will show much of that. But one of the key things that it does, and one of the key secret sources, if you like, of how we build APIs and so forth, is it's not just a pretty user interface. It's not just easy to use. Is we've actually sat down and tried to think about how is it, or where do you spend the most time when you're trying to build an API? And in our experience of working with thousands of customers around the world, the most time is spent in trying to understand how do I actually connect to the backend system that I want to expose an API on, or multiple systems that I want to build a composite API from. How do I understand what interfaces that system actually offers to me, what data formats those systems have, what interfaces are available, and so forth. And we solve that problem for you with what we call smart connectors. So smart connectors ship with the tooling and enable you to connect dynamically to any of the systems that you're likely to have within your organization, to interrogate that system to see what interface it offers. You don't have to worry about what transport protocol to use. You don't have to worry about the complex security profiles. We just present to you the information you need to enter for that. And we can then connect to that system and present that information back to you to enable you to build an API on that system without you really understanding the complexity of how to connect to that system, the complexity of retry intervals and so forth. All of that is taken away from you. So you can just concentrate on building the API logic. And we find this vastly accelerates our ability to build APIs. I'm going to hand over to Shreyas now to take you through a demo showing this in action.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. So, Andy, can you give me a shout once you see my screen in a minute, hopefully? Andy, can you confirm you can see my screen?
I can't see it. Yeah, I can see it. Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. Okay. So what we are going to demo today is that, assuming that you have a team of API developers, right? And the function of the API developer is, as Andy mentioned, right? It's fourfold, right? So they are responsible for developing the API. They are responsible for then applying security policies to the API and then managing those API. And lastly, publishing and socializing those APIs with the wider developer community, which could be internal app developers / mobile app developers, or it could be external business partners who are further consuming your APIs. The idea here is to offer you with a solution that is built on top of pre-built native components, which is further accelerated with use of AI and automation to give you an unparalleled productivity when you are building these APIs, or your API developers are building these APIs. So before we kickstart the demo, let's set up the scene. So assume that I am the API developer. Now my sales team has recruited me because they are currently working on a mobile application. And as a part of their mobile application, they require a function such that they can synchronize contact information between the two sales applications that they use within the organization. Straightforward task. And let's see, right, how I would go about doing it, right? I would build the API. I would test the API, debug the API, and then socialize it with my mobile application developer team so that they can take it forward from there. So to start with, I would land up in the IPM Integration Designer. So what you see on the screen is the Integration Designer solution. I start with creating flows for an API. Now at this stage, I could either upload an existing OpenAPI definition, version 2 or version 3, or I can start from scratch. So let me start from scratch and see how it goes. So I would create a model. In this case, my model is a customer, and then I define a couple of properties. I'll keep it simple, ID and a new ID. And the very next step is that I need to define what my operation is. A simple post operation would do. And that's it. At this point, my API endpoint is ready to go. Now what I need to do is I need to define the business workflow of what this API operation needs to perform. Now, I would go into my connectors catalog, the connectors that Andy mentioned. I pick up the Microsoft Dynamics. And what I need to do is retrieve the context from Microsoft Dynamics. Remember, I'm syncing my contact information from Microsoft Dynamics to Salesforce. Now, at this point, what the connector is doing is retrieving the contact for the ID that was passed with my API request. And now I can test it and validate it whether it is working as desired. I pass it a ID of contact that I know. And just by testing it, remember, I'm not going through the entire deploy cycle. It's right here. I'm quickly validating, I'm quickly testing, debugging, and figuring out whether it is doing exactly what it needs to do. And I can validate that, yes, it did indeed fetch the right contact. Now, the next step is that I need to now synchronize or map this information that I receive from Microsoft Dynamics into Salesforce. So I again go into my connectors catalog. Now I need to create or update a contact in Salesforce. And this time, as I mentioned, the task is a bit more trickier, right? I need to map the information that I'm getting from Microsoft Dynamics to Salesforce, which could be hundreds of fields and metadata that I need to map. But not to worry, right? As Andy mentioned, the solution is completely powered by AI. And what you are seeing right here is that the AI algorithm running within the solution has already analyzed the incoming source data and the target target data that needs to map into, and already come up with suggestions. And I can customize the suggestions as I want, so I can delete it or I can add it as I need it. And once I'm happy, I would go and apply these suggestions, and as simple as that, in under 20 seconds, I've already got my map done. Now, of course, I may want to do more customization, so I can very well go into individual field. I can click into individual field, and remember, it works like a spreadsheet. So the moment you click in, again, the AI algorithms click in, and it would start giving you suggestions of what you may want to do. Now let's gear it up a bit. Now let's assume that I don't want to do a straightforward data mapping, right? I want to do some transformation or manipulation of data. So for example, in this case, I want to map email domain. I don't have email domain, but what I do have is email. And it can be tricky because this would require deep understanding of mapping functions or scripting or whatnot. But again, what you're seeing on the screen is another AI feature at display. So all it requires you to do is provide a combination or samples of few source samples and what you intend it to be, to transformed into target S. As you can see, right, in this case, if it is my email address, that is shreyas@ibm.com, all I care for is ibm.com, and that's exactly what I'm offering to it. I'm offering it some random, valid source and target data. And when I click on that generate button, it generates the mapping function for me. Right? Let's make it a bit more interesting. I'll just change my expected target. I insert a capital D colon in front of my domain. And when I click on the generate button this time, it will generate a different mapping function for me that exactly achieves the job for me. And as simple as that, I've got my transformation completed as well. Now on to my API. Now the final process is I've got my data from Microsoft Dynamics, put it into Salesforce. I need to complete my API response. Again, as simple as filling out a spreadsheet. So the ID gets the request ID, new ID is the ID of the contact created in Salesforce, and done. Now, right here, remember we started with the API creating from the scratch up. There is a lot of automation going into the solution where it automatically generates an open API definition for me. Remember, I did not supply it an open API definition, but it will automatically generate for me. Right out here, you can see all the Open API various configurations. And when you click on the source code, this is what the Open API definition is for you. And using the same utility, now you can also apply gateway policies. So you can apply your security policies, you can apply your transformation policies, you can apply your rate limit policies, everything right here contained in the same UI. And the moment I switch it on, I turn on the API, at this point it is live now. And if you notice, a test button immediately popped up. So what it has done is, right with the click of a button, it has now gone through the complete deployment pipeline for you, right? And such that it is now live and available for your developers to poke at it. What you're looking at right now is a test client that is offers. It comes with multiple options of pre-built templates of test clients available in different programming languages. And now let's go and test this end-to-end, right? So we can test it with the same source data that we tested or validated the flow with. And this time when I test this API, it is testing the end-to-end API, right? So it goes through the gateway, it invokes the business workflow, and it completes that API. So what it should have done is, it should have created a contact in Salesforce. And when you click on it, as you notice, this is the contact that we had in Microsoft Dynamics, and now it is available within Salesforce, right? And it also has applied the transformation logic that we did. Now, one more important thing that happened when we turned on or published the API, it went through the complete deployment cycle, and it also made the API available on my developer portal. So what you are seeing on your screen right now is the developer portal. It reads IBM API Connect Developer Portal, but that is just a branding, right? So you could customize this developer portal and brand it the way you want. And it will offer similar functions for your developer community to try out similar templates, to try it out and test it and figure out whether it is doing exactly what it is doing or not. So as you saw, in a matter of just minutes, I went through the complete API lifecycle, right? So I developed the API from the scratch up. I debugged it, I validated it, I tested it, I applied security policies to it, I managed it. And then finally, I pushed it live onto my developer community, where at this point, my developers can access it. They can sign up to it. I can give it to my business community partners, and I can apply plans at it, monetize it, so on and so forth, all the nice stuff in just a matter of minutes. And this is the power that IBM integration brings to you. So at that note, over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Sras. I'll just flip back to the charts. Are they showing now, Sras? You can see the charts?
They are now, yes.
Great. Thank you very much. So that demo, which was only really for like 5 minutes, showed it in real time how easy it is to actually create an API using our automated API builder. And if you think of the complexity that it took out of the process to show you like how to connect to systems. You didn't have to do any of like speaking to admins or delving into manuals to figure out how to do it. You built the logic of the API really, really quickly. It then showed applying policies to that API, which would then be enforced by an API gateway in our solution. And it showed you like doing like some unit testing of that API. So it's a really powerful tooling to make it very quickly and easy to build those APIs and apply those policies. So meet those criteria I was talking about first. But I mean, API testing doesn't really just stop with that kind of unit testing that Sreya showed in the tool, enabling you to test the kind of the implementation of the API. And so what we're looking at when we're building within IBM is how can we actually make the whole process of building and testing APIs much simpler than it has ever been before. And the way we're trying to do this is we're looking at like how we can apply AI to API testing. So we can improve the quality of an API by looking at like what's actually happening. For example, at like what's actually happening with the API when you're running it in production, or looking at the API definition in order to generate tests for you. Because I actually think that the process of building an API is time-consuming, but it isn't as time-consuming as generating genuinely useful test harnesses and test suites for that API. It's a real labor saver if we can make the process of building those APIs much easier for you. Sorry, testing those APIs much easier for you. And what we've actually delivered in the product already is the ability to analyze the Open API specification, and from that specification, generate tests based on like kind of what it can see in terms of the Open API definition in order to test that API fully. And what's coming very soon is we have a feature called API Auto Test, which will then take that information and generate and run thousands of requests based on that Open API definition. So it will generate like random data in order to test against all the possible parts of the API. And it's biased using AI to what it considers to be the most likely path, but also look and explore 4 paths that you have not explored in your own testing in order to generate like and fully stretch that Open API definition. It doesn't need to use production data, although we are looking at how we might extend it in the future. It looks at the Open API documentation, it generates tests for you based on that, and then can be used to fire tests at that endpoint. And you can schedule it to run. You could say, I want to run like tests continuously for 13 hours using like randomly generated data in order to test that result. And then you can see and view reports on that test in the UI. So this means that the whole process, like Sreya has already demoed, of building an API is massively simplified and accelerated. And we're also extending that in how we would be able to build and generate and test APIs for you. So you can build basically an API with a complete regression test harness for it, kind of out of the box. It only just like kind of a few clicks. So that really accelerates that process, which meets that goal we were discussing of the API integration strategy of making it quick and easy to build APIs, where agility is critically important. And I want to talk a little bit like if we think about like how we use APIs, and we talked about how like critical to the reasons we are building APIs is we want to build new digital customer experiences. But if we think about like a customer experience, think of the example of like a cell phone for an airline, and you think about that airline app, you think that actually the interactions you want to have are of two types. And one very much fits the sort of classic definition of a REST API. And that's where the user is driving the interaction with the app. So think of the example of, I want to use the airline app to book a ticket, or I want to use the airline app to reserve a seat. That's me initiating the conversation. So it's me going, I want to book this ticket. So that very much backs the pattern of an API, where it's the consumer of the API calling that API in order to interact with the back-end system. And that's what I would call like a synchronous API. But other types of interaction I want to have in that mobile app don't really fit that model. So if you think like the example, I would like as the airline to notify all passengers on a particular flight that there's been a gate change or the flight's delayed. That is a different model. That is like where I want to be able to publish out information that has changed to anyone who's subscribed to it. And that is an increasingly growing area within APIs called asynchronous APIs. Now, it's not particularly like new as a concept. If you think about like kind of what technologies are used to back APIs, obviously REST is the first thing that you can think of. But actually, there's a whole bunch of other technologies which could be used to provide APIs, some of which provide that kind of asynchronous pub-sub communication. In particular, very popular with digital applications is Kafka technology or webhook technology. But we also have like kind of obviously a huge infrastructure within IBM, also really built on MQ, doing a similar thing about how do I push data asynchronously. And all of those are really APIs and are defined as asynchronous APIs. So in order to deliver on the ultimate customer experience, your APIs need to be both synchronous and asynchronous, so you can cover both sides of that conversation. And if we think about like kind of what's provided within IBM, IBM has a completely supported implementation of open source Kafka technology, so Apache Kafka, fully supported by IBM, called IBM Event Streams. And this is like provides all of the capabilities you need to work with Kafka. And also kind of pretty much unique to IBM is, as I described previously, MQ already has a huge amount of data that is flowing around your network. So pretty much like most companies probably have MQ in some form or other as part of their integration architecture. How can I access that data? How can I access that data as an asynchronous API? How can I make use of that in my API-led integration strategy? And what we have in IBM is we have this feature called streaming queues over MQ. And what this will do is effectively it would say, just through configuration, I can point at any particular MQ I have in my infrastructure and just duplicate the messages that are written to that queue. So I can duplicate those messages and push them onto Kafka, onto event streams, or make use of them within like an API flow without having to change any of my existing applications. I've unlocked the data that was locked away behind MQ in order to be able to use it in the API economy going forward. So that's a particularly unique feature that IBM provides, is our ability to reach that system and bridge between like kind of the traditional integration world without requiring you to rewrite all those systems. But also, I think like unique to IBM is if you think about like a REST API, it goes through a whole life cycle. So I want to be able to discover that API. I want the developer to be able to find that API wherever it might reside. I then want to be able to build an API. So I want to build that flow and then be able to reuse that API. I want to publish it to a portal. So basically the demo that Sreya showed of building an API and consuming an API and so forth. But equally, this would apply to asynchronous APIs. So I want to be able to do the same things for all the other different transport protocols I showed you in the slide. So like Kafka event streams, I want to be able to manage the life cycle of them. And what IBM provides, which is pretty unique in the whole industry, is within our API management portal and our API catalog, we also provide the capability to add asynchronous APIs in the form of Kafka events. So we have this unique API management capability that means you can manage REST and Kafka endpoints in the same tool. And as a consumer of those tools, they all appear to me as APIs. I can just see that some of them are synchronous, some of them are asynchronous, and I can then consume those APIs in exactly the same way as if they were REST APIs and manage them all as the same thing. So we cover both sides of what you need to deliver a compelling digital experience built on APIs. We cover all of the sort of APIs you need. And I'm going to head back to Shreyas for another demo where it's going to show how the same tooling can be used to build these APIs and push them into the same portal so that the process is very similar in terms of building those APIs or
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And I should be sharing my screen now. Okay. So we will take it off from where we left. So let's assume that we now have an API that exactly does the job for me, right? So it is taking a contact information and on demand synchronizing it with another sales application. Now, the challenge I have is that I need to now broadcast these changes to my enterprise-wide organization so that any app feeding off that information, it can also update that information likewise. Now, the best way to do that, as Andy mentioned, right, to create these compelling digital experiences is that I would dip into and create an event streams and then expose it as an asynchronous API that, and then make it available to the same developer community. So let's see what that process looks like. Right, so this time I go into event streams because I need a Kafka topic. So I go in here, it's called my topic, and this is what I will use to publish my Salesforce updated information onto. Now I'm back into the integration designer. I click on event, a new flow that is event driven, because unlike APIs, I want this to be triggered by an external event, an external entity, in this case, Salesforce sending some information to this flow, which is then going to take some actions because of that. So I go back to my connector catalog. I find Salesforce. This time I'm looking for an event. So this connector now is ready to, or this flow now is ready to listen to Salesforce every single time a contact is created. Now all I need to do is I need to go into and find my Kafka connector. And I need to publish this information onto my topic. And as you can see, the connector is smart enough to discover already all the topics that I have on that Kafka stream. And that is, and in this case, it is my topic. And it is fully integrated with Avro schema as well, if we already had one. But in this case, I'll keep it simple. I'll take the Salesforce contact and then simply put it on to the Kafka payload and done. And now, as you saw, just by clicking on start, that's how simple it is. And now this flow, integration flow, the event-driven integration flow is ready to run, right? It's published, it's live. So now let's simulate the situation. And this time around, I will manually create a new contact, right? So I feed in the information, and the moment I click on save, it's created a new contact, it's gone and triggered to my flow, and now it's published the contact information onto the Kafka topic. So I look at my topic, I find the payload there, and I review it. It's the Tony Kershaw contact that I had just recently, very recently created in my Salesforce. All right, okay, so this is done. So my flow is working as intended. Now, before I share it with my developers, what I need to do is I need to perform exactly similar tasks that I did with my API in the previous use case. Now I need to secure it, I need to manage it, and then publish it to the same developer portal so that my developer community can access it, can go to one single place and access it like any other API that is available. So as you can see on the screen, I'm creating a new async API endpoint. So it requires a few details of my event streams or my Kafka properties, right? For example, the URL, the topic name, which is my topic, and then it requires the schema, in this case, the customer contact Avro schema that we are using. And it then requires me to sign into or authenticate this cluster, this gateway with my Kafka cluster. So I just give it some username, password, and that should do the job for me. So all I'm doing is I'm giving access to this gateway to be able to invoke or talk to the event stream Kafka in that case. And that's it. As you can see in my first use case, as it created and generated OpenAPI on the fly, in this case, it generated the async API on the fly. And very similar to the API, REST API, I can now apply gateway policies to this Kafka endpoint, right? Like, for example, authentication and whatnot. And in a very similar way, it also generates my async API document for me. This is the definition, async API, like the one that we saw for OpenAPI, and it's ready to go. Now, the moment I turn it on, it publishes this API and it is live. And as you notice, in real time, it made it available to the same developer portal where the previous REST API existed, so that my development community can go in here, discover all the APIs in one single place. And they can further dig into it. They can download the async API, right? They could go in and subscribe to this async API. They get the client information in multiple programming languages, very similar to what you would do otherwise to your REST API. It's literally doing the same thing. It is offering the same user experience to the developers, right? It's a consistent user experience, irrespective of whether they are working with RESTful synchronous API or asynchronous API. And as simple as that, right? You've connected the dots. Now, all your mobile app developers or application developers need to do is log on to this developer portal, which could be customized and branded per your requirements, and then access these APIs on the fly. So, as Andy mentioned, right, what you're seeing is one single solution, right, that can allow you or support you to drive high level of productivity for your developers, where they can choose and pick which style of APIs they want to create, provide a consistent user experience, an end-to-end consistent user experience such that they can create, secure, manage, and socialize these APIs on the fly in a matter of minutes. And whatever you saw on the UI, this can be completely automated using pipeline scripts as well. Another point, it could be possible that your organization or your enterprise is much more mature and you have multiple different teams who are responsible for API development, API management, event development, and event management. Not to worry. This solution is completely modular. And this is another differentiator for us in the market, where this solution is completely modular and many teams can come together, collaborate, and work independently across these life cycles of the API. On that note, I'll hand it over to Andy. Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Suresh. Can you let me know when the slides are showing again?
And it's showing, yes.
Great, thank you. So Suresh in that demo really showed like the power of the tooling that comes from IBM. We focused very much on how you can build APIs, be them REST APIs or async APIs, how you can then socialize those APIs through a catalog, and how you can define policies for controlling them. Obviously, we back this up with the runtime that goes along with that. And I just wanted to first of all talk about a success story of Heineken. So Heineken is a customer who is using these capabilities. So if you look at the quote here, what they're basically describing is the consumption of APIs. So it's like somebody who wants to build a new digital application or so forth can easily search the catalog built on the IBM API management catalog, find those APIs, figure out how to use it, and get going straight away. And they're doing like they've had some really outstanding results here. I mean, if we look like they've got over 1,000 different APIs exposed, 24 million APIs calls a month, and so forth. And they're having a lot of success with how they are approaching APIs. But let's dive under the covers a bit more about what the IBM solution actually looks like. And I'll start with a view of like, well, if we think about like an API integration strategy. What is it that we need as integration components to be successful to deliver that? And that's what I'm trying to show in this diagram. So firstly, I'm trying to show that there's obviously the view of like kind of API integration, which is what I'm describing as the ability to be able to create, manage, socialize, and secure APIs, which we've discussed extensively. And we've also talked a little bit about the concept of not all APIs are going to be synchronous REST APIs. Some of them will need to be asynchronous APIs in order to support that, and the whole world of event integration. And both of these things, in order to be successful, need a layer above, which provides the sort of management and security layer, so the API portal and so forth, but also a layer below, which is how we actually provide the connectivity to get those things, so the connectors and so forth, and the connectivity infrastructure that enables you to do this. And this, I think, these things, three things in combination, or four if you include the grey management layer, are what you really need to be successful with any kind of modern integration strategy, particularly like API-led integration. And IBM has like products which cover and solve all of these different kind of approaches and needs of integration. If you think about like API integration and what is involved in the step of like integration by building, managing, and sharing APIs, the components that you would need to do this are like you need an API management component, and that API management component is what provides you with the gateway, and it provides you with the portal and so forth. And IBM provides these things either as separate things or collectively as a single joined up offering. And if you wanted to approach these things like on kind of roll your own or just buy the components you need, you could buy IBM API Connect for this and IBM App Connect to provide the connectivity to be able to build and manage those APIs. And IBM Data Power is what provides that API gateway and security. And if we think about like the event integration side, that's where I'm getting like those real-time updates driven to me, and can then also do things like get like real-time data insights and so forth. The primary components that you would need here is a Kafka engine or a messaging engine. So things like IBM event streams and MQ and so forth. But you also need the same as you need for like API management. You need the IBM event endpoint management, which brings those kind of asynchronous APIs into the story. And you need a gateway, and IBM provides these as part of the same technology. IBM Data Power provides like a single gateway that copes with all these things. And then if we think about like the sort of bottom piece, what actually enables me to get this connectivity to my backend's existing systems and so forth, that's really what comes from things like IBM MQ and App Connect with its ability to connect to pretty much anything that you need out of the box. And other technologies like Aspera and Data Power that give me that kind of poor messaging connectivity. And you can buy all of these products separately, or you can buy them collectively in what we would term IBM Cloud Pak for integration. What the IBM Cloud Pak for integration is it's really like a fully integrated API integration and event integration engine. So you can design, implement, secure, test, deploy, manage, monitor, and use any APIs and events. And if you think about what we're trying to do here is what Cloud Pak for integration is a combination of all IBM's integration products into a single offering. So it mixes the support of traditional and modern integration styles and addresses all of the enterprise integration requirements that you might have. And what it also does, I saw there was a question about how we can reach continuous availability and zero downtime, is it provides greater development and operational agility. You know how I talked at the beginning about how agility was important to modern integration strategies and how I need to be able to modernize in order to provide more agile integration architecture. And the Cloud Pak for integration provides that because it's built 100% native on top of Red Hat OpenShift Kubernetes. So I can get a more agile integration architecture based on any DevOps best practices that are out there. And what the Cloud Pak also provides is platform level features. So I get things like operational dashboard and platform navigator and get a single view of integration states. And that means that I get a much reduced cost in terms of simplified operations and management that come with the platform. But what we also have as part of the Cloud Pak for integration is a lot of what we've shown today. So a lot of additional value comes only within the Cloud Pak for integration. So we addressed those things like API-led integration, where Shreyas was showing was actually a combination of like user interfaces from App Connect and API Connect, which have actually delivered as a single user experience in the Cloud Pak to drive things like the ability to build APIs, manage APIs, test APIs as a single experience. And we're also showed something which is unique around the event endpoint management combination with API management as a single tool to manage APIs of any kind. And all of the AI and automation features that we demonstrated are native to the Cloud Pak. So they're features you get by buying the Cloud Pak. So the Cloud Pak is really the kind of Rolls-Royce product that you would buy to address any kind of integration requirements that you have. But unlike other technologies you might see on the market, it doesn't mean that it's just like a single hammer. So it's not just a single tool, a single hammer that solves the problem. Because you think about like APIs, you actually do operationally want to be able to separate things out, like gateways, because I want my gateways to run in DMZs. I don't want them running on the same technology stack that I'm running my implementation of integrations for. And within the Cloud Pak for integration, still have this model of being able to, at deployment time, separate things out and scale them independently. So if I need to run more gateways, I don't have to run more of the app integration layer. And that gives us a much more flexible architecture and culture and so forth, which means that we can really focus on continuous availability with zero downtime, without at the cost of everything has to scale and be deployed multiple times, even though you're only using tiny parts of each component. So as a summary, if we look at what IBM integration provides for APIs, we have very simple API tooling. And I think if I haven't seen, and I do spend time looking at different products here, a simpler API tooling that is as powerful to build APIs. And how we actually have, the reason why it's simple is because of the automation of AI that we have built into the product. And this is recognized if we look at like kind of Gartner reports like Gartner MQ for the full life cycle of API management, with IBM being a leader in that space. But what we also provide within IBM integration is those things like, okay, we can't just be about the development experience. It also has to be about how does it run, how does it operate, and so forth. And IBM supports like multiple and hybrid cloud deployments. So we have the most flexible architecture based on OpenShift, but you can also deploy wherever you like, you know, whatever is supported on different technologies. You don't have to deploy on OpenShift. We provide deep integration with microservices. So we've talked a lot and focused a lot on API integration, so exposing things as APIs. But obviously a lot of APIs also exist which are just written as APIs in microservices and so forth. And you can easily integrate them into our API management tooling and so forth. And because of our API catalog and our ease of use experience, make it very easy to automate and get access to that API. So we provide everything you need in a single toolkit, a single purchase that can address any API requirement you have to be successful in the API integration market. If you want to find out more and see more, all of these demos are on YouTube. If you want to go onto YouTube and just Google, you can see like much of the demo that Shreyas showed and other features we have, much of the AI, so the AI API testing I mentioned, in order to increase your understanding of how the IBM process is really quicker and easier than anything else out there. And if you want to go and actually have a play with it yourself, you don't need to sign up or speak to your IBM sales guy to get like a trial of the software or anything. You can just go to the IBM homepage, Cloud Platform Integration homepage, and sign up for a simple 14-day trial, which will provision instantly in front of you, and has on it guided labs that will show you how to build APIs, how to secure APIs. Very much the whole thing that Shreyas demoed to you, you can do yourself. You can sign up for a free trial and use that as a demo for yourself. Great. So that's all we wanted to cover for today. I want to thank everybody for their time. We've got a few minutes. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please do so in the chat. Trace and I can see the chat and we'll read them out and answer. I'll just give a few minutes for people to do that. And if there's no questions, we'll just close.
So Andy, I think there are a couple of questions that has already popped up. So let me read it out to you, and we can. So the first question is on the continuous availability with zero downtime, which you've already answered. The operations features that we offer allows customers to continuously deliver new code to production, as well as maintain operational stability to offer zero downtime. I think the next question is, can we use the designer in standalone installation of App Connect Enterprise, or do we need to use the Cloud Pak for integration?
So the answer is that yes, designer is included in App Connect Enterprise. However, many of the features that we've demonstrated around APIs, so the combination with the gateway policies and so forth, are unique to the Cloud Platform integration, and all of the AI is there. However, yes, if you have App Connect standalone, you can use many of the designer capabilities within that. So I'll just read the next question, Fraser, maybe you can answer. So
sure.
Can IBM integration designers deploy APIs using OAuth to enable user tokens to be shared across hybrid clouds?
So the answer is yes and yes. So if you are in Cloud Pak for integration, you have the full capability powers of App Connect completely integrated with the API Connect, which absolutely supports securing your APIs with OAuth and user tokens, which absolutely can support managing APIs across hybrid cloud scenario, including on-premises and multi-cloud, right? A total hybrid cloud solution is absolutely, that is something supported. If you are not on Cloud Pak for integration, you can still create this architecture where you essentially purchase and install the standalone App Connect and API Connect solutions and still try and achieve the same thing, right? It is, as Andy mentioned, right? It is the power of integration. It is the power of automation. It is the power of AI that makes this job so easy in Cloud Pak for integration, which is why it's the touted Rolls Royce of the solution. All right, Andy, I'll read the next one. So what options, considerations for data residency and sovereignty requirements during API integration? Do we do residency and sovereignty in API Connect by any chance, Andy, if you recall?
Certainly, it's possible to implement these things with our solution. Data residency based on sovereignty is more of a data integration use case. So we have capabilities within the Cloud Platform integration. But I think I'm not entirely clear on the question, but I strongly suspect the answer would be, if we had a clear use case in front of us, then yes, you would be able to do that. And we would provide the options and the hooks to enable you to figure out things like data residency and sovereignty.
Absolutely. I think the next question is
about the links to the lab. The lab is available if you just went to ibm.com and search for Cloud Platform integration. There's a link there which is like start the trial. So I think the actual address would be like ibm.com/cloud/Cloud Platform integration. But you should be able to find it just by going to ibm.com, and it's just on the Cloud Platform integration homepage.
Absolutely. I think the last question is, does async API work like webhooks to send messages to mobile applications?
So yes, I mean, WebSockets is just an example of an asynchronous API. We were focusing a lot on using Kafka for that, but basically, yes, it's any technology where instead of me wanting the consumer to call in order to, or poll in order to understand what's changed, the data is pushed to me. So WebSocket is just another implementation of technology like that, and one that we're actually looking to in the future include into our API management infrastructure. So you can actually have async APIs backed by WebSockets. And just to be clear, you can work with WebSockets today in Cloud Platform integration. It's just the API management thing doesn't have a specific definition of it that you can use in that portal tool. So I think that's all the questions that we've had. I'd like to thank everyone for their time and interest. You'll see both of our email addresses here on the screen, and do feel free to reach out with any follow-on questions or so forth. If not, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.